In Lesson 1-2, you'll use the order of operations to evaluate expressions. Sometimes the order of operations is referred to as PEMDAS, or your parents may have remembered it being called "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Basically, it helps us to know the order in which to solve a problem, so when the same problem is given to anyone, anywhere in the world, the ending answer is going to be the same no matter what. The first step is the P for parentheses and other grouping symbols. Then it's E for exponents, such as 5 squared. The M and D are grouped together because it's multiply and divide from left to right, whichever comes first. Some people make the mistake of thinking that multiplication needs to come before division because it's first in PEMDAS, but that's not the case. It's whichever one of the two comes first from left to right. Same thing with adding and subtracting. Those are done also from left to right, whichever comes first. Before we get into order of operations, we just have one quick power to evaluate. 3 to the 5th power, you remember from the last lesson, this means 5 threes being multiplied together. Or 3 to the 5th is equal to 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. And when you multiply all those threes together, you get 243. Now, example 2, we move on to use the order of operations. I do not have anything in parentheses or other grouping symbols, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the E for exponents. One thing I'd like to see while you're doing your work is to underline the part of the problem you're doing. 2 squared means 2 times 2, which is 4. And then I'd like you to rewrite everything else. Basically, you're going to do one step at a time. One, it allows me to see what you're doing, and if you do make a mistake, we're able to track back and see where your mistake was made. Plus, if you try to keep this all up in your head, you're going to make more mistakes than if you write it out. Next, we're going to move on to multiplication and division from left to right, whichever comes first. We only have division here, so I'm going to go ahead and do 8 divided by 4, which is 2. Rewrite the rest of the problem. Now we're going to add and subtract from left to right. This is one of those places where some people might be tricked and they might think to do the adding first, but you remember you need to go from left to right, whichever comes first. So 16 minus 2 is 14, and then 14 plus 14 is 28. When you're all done solving an order of operations problem, it should sort of look like a funnel. Starts out big and gets smaller and smaller until you're down to a single number answer. In example 3, we have some problems with grouping symbols. I'm going to go ahead and write PEMDAS at the top here just so I remember my order. So in this first example, I'm going to go to the parentheses first. 10 minus 6 is 4. Rewrite everything else. I don't have any exponents, so I'm going to move on to multiplication and division from left to right, whichever comes first. I can actually do both of these in the same step since they're separated by this addition sign. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 5 times 4, remember when a number is right outside of the parenthesis, it means to multiply. 5 times 4 is 20. Now we're going to go ahead and add 20 plus 2. 20 plus 2 is 22. Our next example gets a little bit trickier because inside of these grouping symbols, we have some more parentheses. Basically, when you're inside of parentheses or other grouping symbols, you follow the order of operations once you're inside. So we're going to go all the way to the inside parentheses. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite everything else. I'm still working within the grouping symbol here. Next up would be exponents. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Rewrite everything else. We still have subtraction inside of there to do. 32 minus 25 is 7. And the 6 right on the outside means to multiply 6 times 7, which is 42. Next up, we have one with a fraction bar. The fraction bar really is like a division sign. It also groups it in such a way that you are going to do what's on the top, then do what's on the bottom, and then take those two and divide. So on the top, following the order of operations, I have an exponent, so I'm going to do that first. 2 to the third power means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So I really have 8 minus 5 on the top and 15 plus 9 on the bottom. Well, 8 minus 5 is 3, and 15 plus 9 is 24. Now you could go ahead and do 3 divided by 24, or you could just simplify 3/24 by dividing both the numerator and denominator by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So it's 1/8. Our last example is an algebraic expression. So we need to first substitute the different values for the variables into the problem. So I'm going to rewrite this expression with these numbers in place of x, y, and z. So I'm going to start by saying 3 times x squared, and x is 4, so 3 times 4 squared, plus inside the parentheses we have 2 times y, so 2 times 5, plus z to the third, and z is 3, so 3 to the third power. Now, following the order of operations, we're going to go inside the parentheses first and follow the order of operation once we're inside of there, which brings us to the exponent. 3 to the third power means 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is going to be 27. Rewrite everything. Now inside parentheses, we are going to do the multiplication. 2 times 5 is 10. Rewrite everything. Ten plus 27 is 37. Now that we're finally done with the parentheses, we can move on and do the exponents. 4 squared, remember, is 4 times 4, or 16. Then we're going to multiply before we add. So 3 times 16. 3 times 16 is 48, plus 37. 48 plus 37 is 85. One of the most common mistakes on this problem is right here. A lot of times kids will try to multiply 3 times 4 together first and get 12 and then square it. They, for some reason, forget about the order of operations. If they wanted you to do 3 times 4 first, they would have had to put it in parentheses. Since there aren't parentheses around the 3x, then it's only the x that's being squared, or in this case, 4 is being squared. And you would do that first before you multiply by 3.